I retired from the South Carolina Highway Patrol, Lorraine and I moved to Colorado Springs, Colorado, where we attended the Church of the Nazarene Bible College. While we were there, there was a Nissan dealership not far. We actually would pass it between the Bible college and where we were living. And one day we passed that and we saw this white four-door Frontier, Nissan Frontier, sitting in the used car lot. And my wife commented, she said, I really like that. I've never had a truck, but it's a smaller truck. I wonder if I could drive it. And so we had some free time. I said, well, let's just go find out. So we pulled into the car dealership. Salesman came out and I told him, I said, now I'm going to be straight with you. I said, we're really not here to buy a vehicle. We don't have enough money to buy this vehicle. I said, but we are interested to know whether or not my wife can drive it because she's short of stature and so she's not sure if she'd be able to reach the gas pedal, thing like that. I said, we would just like to see if she could drive it. And he said, well, sure. When got the key, she got in it, she drove it, she loved it. I mean, it fit her just right. It placed her way up in the air. I mean, she just felt great. So the gentleman said, well, come into my office and let's talk about it. And so he says, well, I give you a great deal, but what we need to get out of that truck is $18,000. And I told him, I said, well, just like I told you in the beginning, I said, we didn't come today to buy a truck. We just wanted her to drive it. I said, we don't have $18,000. We cannot afford $18,000. And so I said, I appreciate it. He said, well, how much can you afford? I said, we could probably go $12,000. He said, well, you're looking at way too much truck for $12,000. And I told him, I said, well, that's what I've tried to explain to you. We cannot afford this truck at this moment. I said, we just wanted to test drive it. And so as salesmen will do, he said, well, let me check on a thing or two and back and forth and back and forth. At some point in the deliberation, as he was coming down on price, I made the comment to him. I said, now I do need to tell you something. I said, if for some reason you end up getting us to the place where we decide that we're going to buy this truck, I said, before I sign any paperwork, I said, I will go home. And he said, well, why in the world would you do that? I said, well, I do that because there's pressure whenever a person is buying a vehicle. And if I go home, it allows me to have a release of that pressure, and it allows me to think for at least a few minutes about whether I'm making a good decision or not. He said, well, whatever. And so we kept back and forth, and finally he got down to $13,000. And at that point, Lorraine and I both realized this is a exceptionally good deal. And so I told him, I said, all right, we plan on taking it. I said, but before I sign any paperwork, I'm going home. And he said, well, why are you doing? He said, this price is a right now price. I said, well, if it doesn't extend to me going home and coming back, then I'm not going to be able to get it. And he said, well, there's no reason to go home. I said, well, it's my policy. I'm going home. So I went home and got a drink of water. We turned around, went right back up to the dealership and signed the paperwork. My wife loved the truck and enjoyed driving it for years. The salesman told me that day, he said, the only reason that you got this truck at this price was because it's the policy of our owner of this company that he wants to make sure that we sell at least one vehicle per day. And he said, we have not sold a single vehicle today. And he brought this price down so that he made sure that we sold one. Well, God really blessed us and helped us, and we're certainly thankful for that. Well, my name is Richard Coleman, and I'm the pastor at Shepherd Church of the Nazarene in Lexington, South Carolina, and it's great to be able to spend just a few moments with you today. We're looking at the place in Numbers where the old generation has now passed away. They're trying to get to the promised land. The old generation has died out. Now the new generation is there. They're really close to where they're getting ready to cross over. But where they're currently camped, there's a lack of water. And so they start grumbling and they start complaining there's not enough water. Well, during this time, Miriam dies. Now that's Moses' sister. And if you'll remember back when, in the story when Moses was first born, the Pharaoh had said all boys were supposed to be killed. And so Moses' mother put him in a basket, placed him in the Nile, and he started floating down the Nile. And she told Miriam, how about go and follow the basket and see where it ends up? And so Miriam was there when the princess found the basket. And Miriam went up to the princess and said, would you like for me to find a Hebrew mother to nurse the baby until he gets weaned? And all. So Miriam was around. So when I think of Miriam, I think not only as the older sister, but probably a bit of a mother figure for Moses. And so it's easy, and I've done it so many times, just passed right over that where it said Miriam died and just kind of let it just wash right off. But I believe that this was a really big deal in Moses' life. This was a time of mourning for him. And as he was mourning, you've got this new generation of Israelites. They're grumbling, they're complaining, they're just going on and on and on about not having sufficient water. And I can only imagine the stress that Moses was under. So Moses goes to the Lord and he said, these people are grumbling, and please help me do something to help them. And so God said, well, what I want you to do, go get your staff, and I want you to go over to this rock, and I want you to speak to the rock. I don't know if you remember, but many years before, when the first generation of Israelites, God had actually told Moses to take his staff and strike a rock, and they would have water, and so Moses did that. Well, this is something new. This is the new generation. He said, I want you to go over and speak to the rock, and when you speak to the rock, water will come forth. Well, again, I hate repeating myself, but let me do this. Miriam had just died. These Israelites were grumbling and complaining, going on and on. I can't hardly fathom the stress, the pressure that Moses was under. He goes to this rock, and all these people are around him, looking at him and wondering what's getting ready to happen. I'm sure giving him the evil eye. And Moses takes the staff and he strikes the rock twice. I think it's important to recognize that water flowed from the rock. God did not disappoint Moses in the eyes of the people. They had their water. But after the people had their water, God came to Moses and he said, Moses, you didn't do what I told you to do. I told you to speak to the rock. You didn't have to do anything physical. You just had to speak to the rock. You went out on your own strength, on your own abilities, and you tried to do something different. And he said, because of that, you're not going to be able to move into the promised land with this new generation. At first glance, whenever I look at this, I'm thinking, well, that just doesn't seem fair. But I also, there's many things that have happened in my life that I could not understand why God allowed them to happen or purposed them to happen. And oftentimes it wasn't until later when I look back and I thought, oh, well, I can see why God did that, or why God stopped this or started this. And it just made perfect sense once I got down the road and looked back. Other things in my life, I still don't know why God allowed a certain way to happen or why he did it a certain way. But I have learned that God has a plan. He has a better understanding of my life and the world around me than I ever will. And so because of that, it makes me think about what happened to Moses. He said, Moses, I'm not going to allow you to go into the promised land. Think about all that Moses had done, all 40 years with all those grumbling people in the desert. Did Moses really want to go with his new grumbling generation into the promised land and have to fight all the battles that was coming up? Would Moses really want to do all of that? I'm thinking maybe that God was punishing him, maybe so the new generation could see the importance of doing what God said. In some ways, I'm thinking he was giving Moses a little bit of relief also. Moses, let's turn this over to another leader. Let's let somebody else bear the burden as all this happens. You see, it's a new generation. Why not get a new leader? Why not move into a whole new area of expertise? Kind of move a little bit to move into the New Testament for just a moment. I think of Jesus as he was facing being arrested and being hung on a cross. Jesus knew this was coming. So Jesus goes to pray. And whenever he goes to pray, suddenly there appears with him Moses and Elijah. So what does that tell us? Obviously, Moses did not go into the promised land, but Moses went to heaven. Moses went into God's promised land. So Moses and Elijah appeared with Jesus as Jesus was going through a stressful situation. And the scripture says that they talked. And so I was asking, why Moses and Elijah? And so I'll just focus on Moses here. Because Moses had to deal with grumbling people. Moses had to deal with dissatisfied people. Moses had to deal with people that constantly wanted him kicked out of leadership and somebody else put in his place. They grumbled and complained about his decisions. They didn't like what was going on. They wanted just to desert him. And Jesus was facing some of that. And Jesus knew he was going to be facing some of that. His disciples, he knew, would end up running away. He would end up, public opinion would turn against him. And so I feel like one of the reasons that God brought Moses at that time in Jesus' life to talk with Jesus was to let him know this wilderness experience will pass. There is a promised land, and all will be well. Hold on tight. Your Heavenly Father is going to take care of you. And I think that's the message that we can get today. To realize that just because it looks like all of our plans have gone haywire and we don't know why in the world God would let a particular something happen, God has the master plan. He can see well beyond anything that we can ever imagine. Just put our faith and our trust in Him. We all have those times when we doubt and we wonder. Even Jesus. And God sent Moses and Elijah into Jesus' life to encourage him. And God will send someone into your life to encourage you. Maybe you just need to look around and keep your eyes open for when those people show up and be able to thank God for the fact that they are there. Well, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May His face shine upon you. May you truly be able to experience the love of Jesus this week. Thanks for taking the time and watching today.